What makes a person trade a life of comfort for a life of crime? What turns a well-educated woman from a respectable family into a gun-wielding outlaw? For Pearl Hart, the journey from piety to pistols would make her a legend. This is the story of how she became an icon of the Old West, just as the West itself was fading into memory. The year is 1899. The American West, that great untamed canvas of American myth, is taking its final breath. The age of the gunslinger and the open range is giving way to the railroad and the telegraph, like a wild landscape being paved over by city streets. In this fading light, in the sun-scorched territory of Arizona, a new kind of outlaw would emerge. Not a hardened man who had lived his life on the run, but a woman. A petite, well-educated woman who would commit one of the last prominent stagecoach robberies in American history, and in doing so become a media sensation. Her name was Pearl Hart, but the newspapers would give her a title that echoed through time, the Bandit Queen. She was a paradox, a woman from a conventional background who chose a life of unconventional danger. She was a product of her time, who seemed to defy every rule society had written for her. But how does such a transformation happen? Is it a story of desperation, a quest for the fading romance of the frontier, or was she a brilliant opportunist who understood the power of a good story? The answer is a complex tapestry, woven from threads of rebellion, desperation, and an astonishing talent for self-promotion. To understand the outlaw, we must first understand the woman she was, long before a gun was ever in her hand. Long before the world knew her as the Bandit Queen, she was Pearl Taylor. Born in 1871 in the quiet Canadian village of Lindsay, Ontario, her family was respectable and deeply religious, providing young Pearl with privileges many women of her era could only imagine. She received a good education at a boarding school, where she was meant to be polished into a proper lady, destined for a quiet life of domesticity. But beneath the surface of piety, a rebellious spirit was stirring. The rigid expectations of her life felt less like a comfort and more like a gilded cage. She yearned for something more, a life less ordinary. At around 16 or 17, she made her first decisive break from convention. At school, she became infatuated with a charismatic but reckless man, a gambler sometimes known as Frederick Hart, other times as Brett. In a fit of defiance, she eloped with him, trading a carefully planned future for a life of complete uncertainty. Their marriage was a turbulent affair, like a boat caught in a perpetual storm. The couple drifted from place to place, caught in a volatile cycle of bitter fights and brief reconciliations. By many accounts, Hart was abusive, yet Pearl was repeatedly drawn back to him. They had 2 children, a boy and a girl, but the details of their lives have grown murky over time. The instability and poverty of their existence made raising a family impossible. In a heartbreaking decision, Pearl sent the children to live with her mother, who had since moved to Ohio. This period of her life was defined by a deep and gnawing dissatisfaction. She was trapped in a cycle of poverty and abuse, a far cry from the adventure she craved. The promises of her youth had dissolved into the harsh reality of a life she had not chosen but fallen into. That growing desperation was like dry kindling. All it needed was a spark. That spark would come at, of all places, the World's Fair. The year 1893 was a turning point. Pearl's husband found work as a midway barker at the Chicago World's Fair, a sprawling spectacle of innovation that drew millions. It was here that Pearl's future was irrevocably altered. She was exposed to the burgeoning women's suffrage movement, attending lectures by impassioned speakers who spoke of independence and equality. These ideas planted a seed of defiance, a dawning awareness that she did not have to accept the life she had been given. But her most profound experience came from a show that romanticized a world on the verge of extinction, Buffalo Bill's Wild West. As she watched the thrilling reenactments, she was mesmerized. She saw sharpshooters like Annie Oakley, a woman celebrated for her skill and grit, living a life of fame and adventure. This wasn't the grim hand-to-mouth existence she knew. This was the Wild West of legend, a place of freedom and boundless opportunity. The glamour of the show acted like a siren's call to her restless soul. Years later, she would tell a reporter that at this point she was good-looking, desperate, discouraged, and ready for anything that might come. Fueled by these new ideas, Pearl left her husband. Some accounts say she ran off with a piano player, others that she simply struck out on her own. She boarded a train for Colorado, determined to find the freedom she had seen on stage. But the reality of the West was far harsher than the show. She drifted through a series of menial jobs, working as a cook in rough mining camps and a singer in saloons. It is rumored that she may have at times turned to prostitution to survive. It was during this time that she began to shed her former identity, like a snake shedding its skin. She developed a fondness for cigars, liquor, and morphine, a common but addictive painkiller of the day. The educated girl from Ontario was gone, replaced by a hardened woman who had seen the underbelly of the West. By 1898, she was in Arizona, her prospects as barren as the desert landscape. It was here, at her lowest point, that she received a letter from her brother. Their mother was gravely ill. Desperate for money to travel home, she was ready to do something drastic. And she found a partner willing to do it with her. In a dusty Arizona mining town, Pearl's path crossed with a man known only as Joe Boot. He was a down-on-his-luck miner, and, like Pearl, he was desperate. They tried to work an old mining claim Boot owned, but the rock yielded no gold. Their desperation grew. The news of her mother's failing health pushed Pearl over the edge. She needed money, and she needed it fast. The West was changing, but one relic of its wild past remained: the stagecoach. They hatched a plan to rob the coach that ran between Globe and Florence, Arizona. This was not a crime born of experience. It was an act of pure amateur desperation. In preparation, Pearl cut her hair short and put on men's clothing. A practical disguise, but also a powerful symbol of her break with convention. Armed with a .38 revolver, while Boot carried a Colt .45, they set out to commit their crime. On May 30th, 1899, near a watering point at Cane Springs Canyon, they made their move. They stepped onto the road and stopped the coach at gunpoint. Boot kept his weapon trained on the driver, while Pearl relieved the passengers of their valuables, making off with over $400. In a gesture that would later fuel her folk hero image, she returned $1 to each passenger, so they would have enough for a meal. But their lack of experience quickly became their undoing. Unfamiliar with the terrain, they became hopelessly lost, wandering in circles like novice hikers without a compass. Their trail was easy to follow. Meanwhile, the driver had raced back to town to alert the authorities. A posse led by Sheriff Truman of Pinal County was soon on their tail. On June 5th, they found them. Hart and Boot were exhausted and asleep. Their short-lived career as outlaws was over. But as the jail cell door slammed shut, another door was about to swing wide open. Pearl Hart, the failed robber, was about to become Pearl Hart, the celebrity. The arrest of a female stagecoach robber was an absolute novelty, and the story caught fire like a spark in dry grass, igniting a media firestorm. In an era when women were expected to be demure and domestic, the image of a gun-toting bandit in men's clothes was both shocking and irresistible. Reporters flocked to Arizona. Joe Boot was held in Florence, but since the town had no facilities for a female prisoner, Pearl was sent to Tucson. This separation made her the undisputed star of the show. She was no longer just a criminal, she was a phenomenon. A writer for Cosmopolitan magazine described her as just the opposite of what would be expected, though noted that, when angry or determined, hard lines show about her eyes and mouth. Pearl understood the power of this attention. She posed for photographs, signed autographs, and accepted gifts from admirers, including one who gave her a pet bobcat. The sheriff allowed her to be photographed in her men's clothes, holding a gun, helping craft the very image the public craved. Her celebrity was cemented when she escaped from her Tucson jail by cutting a hole through the plaster wall. She was recaptured 2 weeks later, but the daring escape only added to her growing legend. When her trial began, it was a media circus. In the courtroom, Pearl delivered the performance of a lifetime. She played the part of the victim, tearfully telling the all-male jury she had only committed the crime to see her dying mother. Then she switched tactics, delivering a fiery declaration that stunned the court. "I shall not consent to be tried under a law," she proclaimed, "in which my sex had no voice in making." It worked. The jury, captivated by the Bandit Queen, found her not guilty. The judge, Fletcher N. Doane, was incensed, scolding the jurors for being swayed by a pretty face. It was as if an actor had gone off script and stolen the show, leaving the director furious. Determined to see justice done, prosecutors immediately rearrested Hart and Boot on a federal charge of tampering with U.S. mail. This time there was no acquittal. Joe Boot was sentenced to 30 years. Pearl was given a much lighter sentence of 5 years in the Yuma Territorial Prison. Pearl Hart became one of the very few women to be incarcerated at the infamous Yuma Territorial Prison. Situated on a bluff overlooking the Colorado River, it was a brutal place, known for its oppressive heat and harsh conditions. Yet even here, Pearl was no ordinary inmate. Her celebrity followed her like a shadow. The warden gave her preferential treatment, including a larger cell with its own small yard, where she was allowed to entertain reporters and pose for more photographs. Her time in Yuma was not just about survival. She reportedly fought off her dependence on morphine and spent time reading and writing. But her most audacious act was yet to come. After serving just 18 months of her 5-year sentence, Pearl made a shrewd claim. She was pregnant. The allegation, whether true or not, was like a chess move that put the authorities in checkmate. A scandal was the last thing Arizona's territorial governor wanted. To avoid public embarrassment, he pardoned Pearl Hart on December 19, 1902, on the condition that she leave Arizona for good. After her release, Pearl's life became a patchwork of fact and legend. She created a stage show where she reenacted her famous crime. It's believed she even briefly worked for a Wild West show, the kind of life that had sent her west in the first place. After a 1904 arrest in Kansas City, the trail of the Bandit Queen grows cold. She seemed to vanish. What truly became of Pearl Hart? The stories are as varied as the ones she told about herself. Some say she finally found the quiet life she once fled, marrying an Arizona rancher and settling into domesticity. She is believed to have died sometime in the 1950s, living well into her 80s, successfully fading back into the anonymity she had once so spectacularly shed. Pearl Hart's legacy is a testament to the power of a story. She was a flawed and complicated woman, a criminal, a liar, and an addict who abandoned her children. She was also a survivor, a rebel, and a masterful architect of her own myth. She stepped onto the stage of the dying Wild West at the perfect moment, becoming a symbol of female defiance in a world run by men. Her single amateur robbery was transformed by the press and by her own performance into an enduring American legend. So who was the real Pearl Hart? A feminist icon ahead of her time, or a desperate woman who got lucky? Perhaps she was both, a complex figure who remains to this day the one and only Bandit Queen.